All right, hello everyone. Welcome to my channel. I do educational videos on many different subjects. Um, and for the last couple months, we've been working on studying up the reciprocal system of theory. This is a theory of everything that was proposed by Dewey B. Larson back in the 20th century. He started out way back in 1930 with his initial kind of intuitive um, revelations, and he developed that work over the next 20 years or so until he got to his fundamental postulates. And the principal postulate that's relevant here is that the universe is not made out of matter, and the universe is not made out of energy, but the universe is made out of motion. Motion is the relationship between space and time. In this relationship, space and time have a reciprocal relationship. Space and time are reciprocals of each other in the same way that 2/3 and 3/2 are reciprocals of each other. Basically, numerator and denominator, and flipping them. And then also, so whatever qualities that space has time also has, and whatever qualities that time has, space also has. The principal quality of space that we know is multidimensionality, three-dimensional or four-dimensional tetrahedral coordinates, and that too is true of time. Time is multidimensional in that same way. Those three dimensions of time, however, are not three dimensions of space. They are space-like, but they are time dimensions. And so too, what we know about time is that it's always progressing. And so too, space is progressing. The flow of space, all of the galaxies in time is always getting later and later and later. Space is always getting further and further apart, just like the distant galaxies that was observed by the Hubble telescope. Also, time and space are both discrete, meaning that there is no fractional units. It's not a continuum. It is discrete units. You have to have, in order to have anything, you have to have at least one unit of time, one unit of space. And it turns out that one unit of space in one unit of time is the speed of light. The speed of light in Einstein's system was the fastest speed, and the maximum speed of the universe. In Larson's system, the speed of light is the midpoint of the universe, or the null point. Half of the universe is actually moving faster than the speed of light. He calls that half the cosmic sector, or sector 2. In contrast with the half that's moving slower than the speed of light, the half that we're familiar with, the realm of atoms and physical atoms and molecules. He calls that sector 1, or the material sector. The material sector aggregates through bonding and such like until it gets up to its most complex level, which Larson says is DNA. The DNA molecule has billions of atoms in one molecule. And at that point, its complexity is high enough that it becomes eligible to be controlled by a sector 2 entity. And so when this sector 2 entity comes into the material entity and controls it, Larson calls that the life unit. The life unit is a combination of material and cosmic sector entities. Then the life unit grows and develops over time until it reaches its most complex level, all the way from the single-celled organisms all the way up to the intelligent human being, according to Larson. And at that point, the intelligent human being becomes eligible to have another control, this time from Sector 3. Sector 3 is what Larson calls the region that is outside of space and time, or independent of space and time. Other, cosmologies would have called it God, or gods, or the spirit world, or the religious, the numinous, but Larson calls it Sector 3. Sector 3 is guided by good behavior or ethical behavior. A human being that is under the influence of Sector 3 is called Level 3, whereas a human being under the influence of Sector 2 is Level 2. Sector 2 is guided by survival. So the human being is caught in between, so to speak, in certain situations where those two conflict. And that is where free will comes in. Free will is our ability to choose between these two different options, the survival and the good behavior. Now, there's often times that those two dovetail and they work together, but there are also times where they work in conflict. Sector 3 communicates with Sector 2. That's how it accomplishes its control, through communication to the living being, the intelligent human, through various means such as ESP, intuition, religious revelation, and scientific insight, possibly some things like visions. And those Larson talks about here in his final book, which is called Beyond Space and Time. And as you might guess from the title, the Beyond Space and Time is the metaphysical region. It's talking about Sector 3. So this is in Larson. This book was posthumous, came out in 1995, and it goes into his metaphysical studies. Most of his early books, all of his earlier work, has to do with the hard sciences, like physics and chemistry and astronomy. This was seen as kind of blasphemous by Larson's small group of followers, by some of them. And some of them embraced it. But some would say Larson would have never wanted this book to come out because it's speculation on, that is kind of anti-scientific. But regardless, we're looking at this book to look at Larson's conclusions and also the way that he sets up the reciprocal system. And that's why I think the reciprocal system is so important, is because it puts science in your hands. If you understand the reciprocal system, then you no longer have to listen to the guys in the white lab coats, or the pointy-headed people with a bunch of initials behind their name. You can understand this for yourself. You can figure this out for yourself. And so it really is a liberating system of theory. But it takes a lot of work to get to that point, to get to the point of fluency with the reciprocal system. I've been studying it for over 20 years, and I would say I'm borderline fluent in it. There probably aren't too many people on the earth that know more about it than I do, but I still consider myself to be kind of like an advanced beginner in the reciprocal system. But hopefully you might have an easier time with it, but it's still, to me, very much worth learning, because it gives you independence from potential independence from all the pundits out there that are, as we have seen very clearly over the last few years, are manipulating us and getting us into hysterics over things that if we actually sat down and we had a system of theory, we had a way of thinking about these things, we would immediately recognize this stuff to be garbage. Okay, now we are in chapter 21 here, which is called the moral objective, the personal aspect of ethics. No, it's just called the personal aspect of ethics. Chapter 20 was the moral objective. So this is called the personal aspect of ethics, and we had gotten into about the middle of the chapter, and he was talking about how it is. Let's see here. I'm on the wrong page. Yeah, how self-interest in many situations is, even though by most religious people self-interest is seen as selfish and immoral, um, in many situations self-interest is moral in Larson's system. In that sector 2, like, you have to keep yourself alive and in good condition just in order for you to be able to understand communications from Sector 3. That's the thing about Sector 3. It communicates with us, but we have to translate it, and that's why most intuitions and religious revelations aren't always correct, is because we are translating those messages incorrectly because we're not properly prepared to receive them. So that is, kind of a departure here in terms of morality. Larson is talking about how it's important to have self-interest in many situations, because that is how you help to lay the foundation to actually be able to understand these Sector 3 communications. So we're going to start here. So this is Larson coming up here. The origin of the common practice of branding self-interest as inherently immoral is quite obvious. As we have seen, self-interest is the primary element in Sector 2 behavior, that of the biological organism, whereas the code of Sector 3 involves a considerable degree of subordination of self-interest to the interests of others. The major problem of the religious organizations and moralists in general has therefore been largely a matter of persuading individuals to reduce the role of self-interest in their decision-making. To simplify the problem of persuasion and to strengthen the case for altruism, the moralists have taken what seemed to be the easiest course and have characterized all self-interest as inherently evil. In common with many other excesses committed with the best of intentions, this has some serious consequences. One of these has been the emergence of various types of asceticism, the essence of which is the contention that the interests of man's physical body are antagonistic to the interests of his moral nature, and that denial of physical wants therefore has a positive moral value. The extreme practices in which the body is actually tortured for the sake of the presumed moral benefit are generally repudiated by present-day opinion, but there is a strong tinge of asceticism in most of the major religions. The Christian emphasis on the conflict between the demands of the flesh and those of the spirit is typical. An ascetic doctrine that receives widespread support, explicitly or by implication, is that there is no virtue in doing anything that we actually want to do. The morally commendable actions are the distasteful ones that we carry out from a sense of duty. Religious organizations seldom make any serious attempt to explain their dicta. Questioning the commands of the deity is pointless. But Immanuel Kant has developed this viewpoint at some length, and his name is commonly associated with its expression as a philosophical principle. It is of interest to note that Kant has gone astray because he has misapplied a perfectly valid principle. which he also enunciated. He recognized, as a great many other philosophers, particularly those with strong religious ties, have failed to do, that actions taken in anticipation of reward or to avoid punishment have no moral significance. From the moral standpoint, they have the same standing as any other facts taken in the interest of self-satisfaction. But having arrived at this sound conclusion, Kant then made the assumption that if a person derives what may be called moral satisfaction from an act, the anticipation of this satisfaction must have been the incentive for the act. And on the basis of the principle just stated, this deprives the act of any moral significance. A man may be a very good man, without being morally good in the sense of ethics of Kant. For a man may be, by inclination, benevolent, well-meaning, unselfish, etc. All those actions toward which he was moved by his good inclinations would be, according to Kant, ethically neutral, neither good nor bad, for only actions done for the sake of duty rather than out of benevolent inclination can be good in Kant's sense. This is just a characterization of Kant by Karl Popper. Now back to Larson. The findings of this work are diametrically opposed to Kant's views as described in the foregoing quotation, and the Kantian version of asceticism must therefore be rejected as firmly as the more extreme forms. Our scientific analysis of the situation shows that ethical man follows the moral code simply because the rules that constitute the code are the rules that govern the behavior of ethical men. An ethical man is, by inclination, benevolent, well-meaning, etc., and all of his actions are taken as a result of his good inclinations. The fact that some other person may do the same thing for the sake of duty and seemingly against his own inclination simply means that the latter individual is not as far advanced toward the status of an ethical man, sector 3, level 3, and is able to do the right thing only after overcoming resistance from the sector 2 influences to which he is subject. The basic error of asceticism lies in its assumption of a conflict between physical well-being and morality. We find in our analysis not only that the alleged conflict is non-existent, but that maintaining good physical and mental condition is a positive moral requirement. Actions that harm the physical body are violations of the moral code, regardless of whether they are motivated by self-indulgence or by desire for self-improvement. Like all other violations of the code, they can be justified only if they result in the production of some positive moral values that outweigh the harmful physical consequences. So, if you're listening to Larson, you're not going to be, listening to Jesus telling you to gouge out your eyes. Okay, now back to Larson. Asceticism is not the only doctrine in this area that is revealed as false and misleading in the light of our new findings. The whole concept of moral behavior as a burden and sacrifice is tarred with the same brush. There is no reason why one who follows the moral code cannot lead as pleasant and agreeable a life as anyone else. He can meet all of the legitimate commands of his physical mechanism. Indeed, to be moral, he must do so to the best of his ability. He can, so far as his circumstances permit, enjoy the pleasant aspects of human life. Such things in themselves have no moral connotations one way or the other. To be sure, he must refrain from acting as an animal in those instances where the conduct of animals and that of ethical men differs. But this is no burden. An ethical man wants to act in this manner. He does not want to be dishonest. He does not want to injure his neighbor. He does not want to follow the tooth and claw code of the animal world. Okay, now that's a key point, that ethical development, person that's moving toward level 3, actually, it's not a burden to do the right thing. And I think in a lot of religious evaluations, it is, you have to make a sacrifice. But here, you're doing what you want. What you want to be is good if you're under the influence of Sector 3. Okay, now he goes into a little of the review of different theologians and philosophers. Now we'll get back here. Those religions that have an otherworldly outlook generally tend to regard the pursuit of pleasure, political or economic power, or other non-religious objectives as antithetical to religious beliefs, and are all open in some degree to the criticism expressed in the foregoing quotation. An excessive concentration on secular objectives to the exclusion of religious considerations would, of course, be incompatible with a religious life. But ethical decisions are made and ethical actions are taken in actual practice. Participation in the activities of the secular world is therefore essential in order to gain experience in the application of ethical principles. If it is possible at all, which is highly questionable, development of a well-rounded ethical personality without such experience is obviously very difficult. This is a general rule that applies throughout human life. All right, we will resume tomorrow. Have a great day. See you later.